The Vatican edited the Bible beyond recognition. The real Jesus had almost nothing to do with our traditional beliefs, and the person crucified on the cross wasn't even him. That was Judas. The Christian Church has always been involved in scandals, but recently it's appeared in trending news increasingly often. I've decided to dive into the topic and finally figure out what's wrong with sacred texts and what sensational facts the Vatican is hiding from us. This is the Gospel of Barnabas, which casts doubt on everything the Church tells us about Christ. It was found quite accidentally in the year 2000 in Cyprus during a regular police raid on suspected smugglers. Can you imagine their shock when they seized an old manuscript from one of the offenders and subsequent analysis revealed that it had been created 1,500 years ago? Legal proceedings over the artifact continued for over a decade, and only in 2012 was the Gospel finally handed over to the Ankara Ethnography Museum in Turkey for further study. Experts immediately found it suspicious that the text was presumably written by Apostle Barnabas. But aren't apostles the 12 disciples of Christ, his closest followers? According to the Bible, there's no Barnabas among them. Yet the author claims that there were 70 apostles of Jesus instead of 12, and that he was their primary leader. Moreover, Barnabas obviously disliked another apostle named Paul. Even though the Pauline epistles are now considered the most crucial part of the New Testament and the foundation of nearly the entire Christian theology, Barnabas, however, depicts him as almost a madman in the prologue and epilogue of the Gospel, since Paul mistakenly believed that Jesus was the Son of God. Barnabas, in turn, was sure that God was one. So the concept of the Trinity, including the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, couldn't be a genuine thing. That's consistent with the ideas of early Christians. Note that the word Trinity isn't mentioned in the Bible. It was the First Council of Nicaea that introduced the notion into the young religion in the 4th century AD. Barnabas doesn't stop there. In the Gospels chapter 39, he says that Jesus was a regular mortal man who experienced divine illumination and that the real Messiah would come only in 500 years. Many prominent Muslims see this as a prophecy since Muhammad was born in Mecca exactly 5 centuries after Jesus Christ. On top of that, Barnabas has a different view of paradise. He imagines it as 9 separate levels, just like hell, or rather 9 heavens. While the saints occupy the highest floors and have an awesome time there, if you end up closer to the bottom, it won't feel much different from your previous life on earth. It means that Christians must be twice as righteous if they want to unlock the heavenly suit. But the main sensation is saved for the final chapters of the Gospel. This previously unknown apostle describes the most important event in the New Testament in a totally different way than Paul. According to Barnabas, during the Last Supper, Jesus already knew that Judas would betray him, but he wasn't captured by the Roman soldiers because the holy angels took him out of the window. At the same time, God presumably changed Judas' face so he could look like Jesus and get crucified instead. Therefore, the man nailed to the cross wasn't Christ. The tortured victim was Judas. Meanwhile, Jesus allegedly told Barnabas to write down the truth so that everyone would know what really happened. If you ask me, this insider info looks like a mere attempt to get back at Paul for some personal grudge that Barnabas was nursing. That's why he vigorously denies everything he can think of written by Paul. So why do we have to believe this text has any credibility? Because, oddly enough, the Vatican encourages us to do so by being so messy and acting weird. The point is that legal proceedings over the Gospel of Barnabas were so protracted because the church representatives often interfered with the judicial process. They wanted the text to be immediately handed over to the museum without any expert analysis. Could they be afraid that the new knowledge would undermine the basis of Christianity? Because it doesn't take a genius to understand that the Vatican occasionally lies to us. Socrates of Constantinople, a church historian of the 4th century, said that there was a church founded at the place of Christ's crucifixion. Flavia Julia Helena Augusta, mother of Emperor Constantine the Great, later tried to demolish it and found 3 crosses lying underneath the building. All Christians, without exception, instantly tried to get a piece of such a mind-blowing historical relic, so the crosses were divided between numerous European temples. This story is considered the canon that must not be questioned, period. However, 1,000 years later, French theologian John Calvin noticed a thought-provoking detail. If we take all the pieces currently worshipped as the remnants of those crosses, there'd be enough wood to erect an entirely new church. But when any of these remarks reach Vatican City, they get completely ignored, just like the rest of the alternative gospels full of other, perhaps even more sensational, points of view. Over the centuries, Vatican officials have been tailoring the Bible for themselves. That's not even an assumption. It's a fact. What exactly have they gotten rid of? The last major Bible cleansing happened in 1684 when the Vatican removed 14 out of 80 original books that had been considered sacred. It wasn't a one-time occasion. Procedures like that happened a lot, especially in the first centuries of church history. Back then, Gospels that the priests found inappropriate were called apocrypha. The word is derived from a Greek root that literally means hidden. What is this big secret that the Vatican is so desperately hiding? One of the mysterious apocrypha is called the Gospel of Thomas. It was found in December of 1945 near the city of Nag Hammadi, Egypt. The texts were dug up from underground ruins that used to be one of the oldest libraries. Scientists assume that the papyrus was buried after Bishop Athanasius questioned its legitimacy, and it's clear why. The author describes Jesus as a quick-tempered, mean, and egocentric man. Thomas claims that Christ declared himself a god in infancy, right after learning to speak. Interestingly, the church-approved Gospels give us little to no information about his childhood and youth, and maybe that's because the Vatican found those stories too out of line and tried to erase them. But actually, Thomas doesn't go into much detail about Christ's biography either and focuses on his speeches, or rather on finding underlying meanings there. The apostle was sure that only mastering the skill to decipher their real message can give you a chance to go to heaven, not your good deeds. Since it's a challenging thing to do, most believers, according to Thomas, will never be blessed with divine grace. Such a free interpretation of Christianity is unlikely to attract new followers. So maybe that's why the Church classifies the Gospel of Thomas as an apocryphal writing. In total, it includes 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, and 40 of them can't be found in any other Holy Scripture. What's more, around half of these 40 contain, let's say, highly controversial remarks about women. In saying number 114, the Savior says he's going to make Mary Magdalene male so that she could enter the kingdom of heaven. But why? Thomas was sure Christ dismissed the idea that female souls could be immortal. However, men hardly get a better treatment here. The Jesus described in the Gospel claims that uncircumcised males are banned from heaven too. So, correct me if I'm wrong, but the gist of the text is that of all people, only circumcised men able to find veiled messages in the sexist sayings of Jesus deserve paradise. All of that against the backdrop of the Savior's apparent megalomania. Yet it's quite possible that this was the author's problem in the first place. Thomas openly called himself the twin brother of Jesus, born by another woman. It's no wonder that the Gospel was removed from the Bible. I'm rather curious to know why it was originally included in it at all. Can at least some of these revelations of Thomas be true? Perhaps they didn't bother the church at first, and then suddenly started to. This is the main reason why theologians and ministers would demand to remove entire books from the Bible through the ages. Religion is a very delicate thing, but how can we trust the people shaping it if at some point in history they couldn't even see that the Pope was a woman? In 858, a major scandal erupted in Vatican City. During a procession near Lateran Basilica, Pope John VII, who had been reigning for already 2 years, became very ill. Members of his inner circle were ready to provide any help, but quite soon everyone realized that there was a very specific type of sickness. The Pope went into labor right in the middle of the street. Later renamed Pope Joan, she was born in the German city of Mainz. Gifted with a brilliant memory, the young girl started disguising herself as a man to get an education, since living a female life typical for that era never attracted her. Pretty soon, Joan was invited to Rome, where, still pretending to be a man, she was ordained and rose swiftly in the papal service. Tragically for her, she fell in love with an official who worked in the Curia and had his child. She didn't manage to reach the safety of the Lateran Palace, where the newborn could be hidden from the world, when the crowd suddenly understood they had been fooled for many years. Angry people stoned Joan to death on the very street where she gave birth to her baby. Today, the Church assures us that this is absolute fiction and Pope Joan never existed. But what prompts us to take these statements for granted? Is there any substantial evidence behind the Vatican's confidence that the books they removed from the Bible are misleading? Truth be told, Apocrypha sometimes contradict not only the dogmas of Christianity, but common sense too. In the 3rd chapter of his Gospel, Barnabas claims that when Christ was born, Pontius Pilate had already been a prefect of Judea. Well, according to historical data, he was sent to govern that land when Jesus turned 26. Geographic descriptions in the text are also anything but accurate. In the 20th and 21st chapters, the author says that Jesus and his disciples arrived in Nazareth, a city near the Sea of Galilee. While it's actually located 25 kilometers away from the shore, that's 5 hours of fast walking. There's an even bigger discrepancy between the city of Tyre, present in the Gospel of Barnabas, and its real place on the map. In chapter 99, Tyre is said to be close to the Jordan River, although in fact, more than 48 kilometers separate them. But that's not all. The scale of mistakes only keeps growing. In chapter 63, Barnabas mentions Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, as lying near the Mediterranean Sea, though according to archaeological evidence, it was 645 kilometers to the east in present-day Iraq. Even with modern cars, it's possible to cover this distance in no less than 6 hours. I wonder what kind of vehicle Barnabas was driving if he found it close. If you check chapter 152, you'll see an anachronism. During a fast, wine is kept in huge wooden barrels. In those days, however, people still used large jars to store alcohol. But even if we attribute all these errors to Barnabas's ignorance in certain fields, how can we justify the fact that his gospel is surprisingly similar to medieval texts? It repeatedly mentions Jesus using the expression false and lying gods. It's not present in the Bible or the Quran because this is a catchphrase coined by Dante Alighieri, a poet who lived in the 14th century. Likewise, a specific term, raging hunger, is used by both Dante and Barnabas. And finally, a cherry on this theological cake. In the Gospel, hell is divided into 7 levels, and each of them greets sinners with various forms of torture. That's a direct retelling of the Divine Comedy by Dante. There are only 2 options here. Barnabas was either a visionary who could pre-order and read books centuries before they were written, or he wasn't an apostle. He could be a medieval author who tried to make additions to the Bible post factum. Most modern experts believe that the age of the text was determined incorrectly. It looks like there's been a regular mix-up. The Gospel is not 1,500 years old. It was written in the year 1500 or so. The other text of doubtful origin, the Gospel of Thomas, has no problem with the dates, and it's barely possible to deny its factual basis because the author didn't feel like giving any biographical details about Christ was worth the effort. Nevertheless, theologians came to hate the Gospel so much that they even founded a special society whose members began disproving the text line by line. Christian theologian Origen of Alexandria called it a fake and a heresy. Eusebius, a Greek historian of Christianity, rejected it as an absurd and impious fiction, while the priest Cyril of Jerusalem advised his followers to avoid the Gospel of Thomas at all costs. Is it just me, or does this look like a PR campaign launched to inevitably get people interested in this supposedly banned Holy Scripture? When Christianity was only gathering pace as a new religion, most people on earth were still pagans. How to draw their attention? Quite possibly, Thomas concluded that citizens would be more ready to embrace the new faith if biblical stories reminded them of familiar tales and legends. Maybe that's why he called himself a twin brother of Jesus, born by another woman. This is actually a retelling of an ancient Greek myth about the demigod Heracles and his mortal twin brother Iphicles. And maybe Jesus is so unlikable in the Gospel of Thomas because pagan deities were precisely the same. At that time, Christian goodness seemed extremely foreign to people. What if the Christian dogmas in the Gospel of Thomas were intentionally twisted, and the Vatican made this wise decision itself? And then, when Christianity became a mainstream religion, the text was no longer needed and thus canceled. But even if this is so, theologians must have abandoned the cleansing halfway through, since the so-called canonical Bible has a lot of inconsistencies that shake our confidence in everything the Vatican preaches. In the Middle Ages, searching for goofs in Holy Scriptures was a sure way to get to heaven, but now we can expose them all we want. Starting with the first pages of the Old Testament, it becomes clear that the Bible repeatedly contradicts itself. The famous creation story teaches us that God made human beings on the sixth day, both female and male, at the same time. And then in the following chapter, we read that the first man on earth was Adam, and the first woman appeared from his rib a bit later. Sometimes casual blunders coexist, they're literally back to back. In the first book of Samuel, we find out that David killed Goliath without using a sword, but the following sentence reverses this by saying that David took Goliath's sword and cut his head off. Authors of different Gospels not only struggle with small details, but often can't make up their minds about the most principal thing: what exactly Christ said. Words coming from a man crucified on a cross seemed memorable enough to quote by heart. Wouldn't you agree? And yet, his disciples failed this assignment. In the Gospel of Matthew, dying Jesus cries out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" But Apostle Luke insists that his last words were, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." Meanwhile, John believed that Jesus was rather brief in the last moments of his life and said only, "It is finished." And if we can sense reasonable fear in the first question, in all the other cases, Christ appears surprisingly calm and determined, as if the authors deliberately tried to sugarcoat the whole thing. I think this looks like amateur editing meant to reinforce the Vatican's image. But if you're attentive enough, you'll notice that the Bible has problems even with simple math. In the Gospel of John, it said that Nicodemus, a secret disciple of Jesus Christ, brought him a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 litras. A litra is a Roman unit of weight common in that epoch. It equaled approximately 350 grams, which means that 100 litras were around 35 kilograms. Both myrrh and aloe were used as incense, so just one drop was enough to make the scent linger on the body all day long. If so, Nicodemus was a real weirdo unless he, for some reason, wanted to bathe Jesus in essential oils. All this creates the impression that someone was trying to hastily edit the Bible and completely forgot to proofread it. Some of the recently discovered facts that are not directly related to the Bible obviously imply that the sacred texts we know today are, in fact, just the tip of the Christian iceberg. On the territory of Vatican City, there's the secret Apostolic Archive, which is completely closed to outsiders. According to expert estimates, it contains 85 kilometers of shelving with 35,000 volumes in the selective catalog alone. If you want to enter there, you'll have to undergo one of the most careful vetting processes in the world. Reporters, politicians, and students aren't allowed to access the archive. Only qualified scholars who are at least 75 years old can apply for an entry card. Some people who met the requirements never went inside because they simply died before obtaining permission. But even getting the access right doesn't mean the hardest part is behind you. Lucky, green-lighted researchers have to go through the security checkpoint protected by the Swiss Guard, and if at least one member of the Guard has doubts about a visitor, they may be denied entry despite officially having that card. Moreover, each scholar can take only 3 requested articles, and if they need to examine more texts, the whole procedure must be repeated from the start. We can only wonder what the Church is stashing there if they take every precaution so tirelessly. However, some theories do leak through this utmost secrecy. There are talks about the Vatican officials not allowing free access to the archive because they fear a divine curse. In 1939, 9 human bone fragments were found under St. Peter's Basilica, situated in the heart of Vatican City. At first, experts decided that the remains belonged to one of the church builders trapped underneath a stone slab, but it soon turned out that the bones were nearly 2,000 years old. Most likely, they belonged to St. Peter himself, and according to the Bible, the apostles' remains carry an awful curse. Anyone who dares to disturb their peace will have to bear the pain of skin coming off their bodies until they die. Who knows, maybe there are similar prophetic warnings about the most sacred and priceless items the Catholic Church holds. If so, does it mean the Vatican keeps them locked away for our own good because it wants to save us from divine retribution? Or is the truth quite the opposite, and the only thing priests want is to stop ordinary people from learning that nobody's getting punished whatsoever? After all, the secret archive stores a collection of letters between St. Peter and Emperor Nero. No scientist has ever had permission to read them all. However, the already studied pieces of correspondence say that Jesus never existed. That's a very bold statement, but historians indeed have very little proof that he was an actual historical figure. By and large, everything is based on the Bible, and as we know, It was tweaked many times in favor of the people whose power and influence directly depend on Jesus Christ and his undebatable life path. Perhaps many holy scriptures were dismissed as apocrypha, and the remaining texts are so incoherent because they tell an utterly fictional story about the Savior, and that's why the main details are so chaotic. Of course, whether you trust the Bible or not is a matter of personal choice, but it's hard to disagree that the Vatican has made a lot of questionable moves to erode our confidence in it. The secret archive contains, among other things, some very exotic items. It's known that in the late 20th century, the chronovisor, a machine created by Father Pellegrino Alfredo Maria Ernetti, was moved there. The Italian monk claimed the machine could let people see the past and the future. Even though it sounds almost ridiculous, the Vatican immediately confiscated this mysterious device. Well, maybe priests didn't want us to look into the chronovisor and see what the real Jesus Christ was like, and if he was there at all. Or perhaps they're afraid that we'll find confirmation of the intriguing hints that St. Peter and Nero dropped in those letters to each other and realize that the Vatican is governed by the Illuminati. Would you dare to peek into the past of the Christian Church if you knew it could possibly debunk everything you learned from the Bible?